Welcome to Mr. Boogeyman, where every story is a journey into the unknown. If you enjoy the thrill of the eerie and unexplained, consider subscribing for more chilling tales. Claire shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat as the car jostled over the uneven dirt road. Her editor's words echoed in her mind.
You need to escape the distractions. That cabin will be perfect.
With a deep breath, she tried to quell her growing anxiety. She longed for solitude, but the thought of being entirely alone in the woods was both exhilarating and terrifying. As the vehicle came to a halt, Claire stepped out and was met with a crisp breeze that swept through the trees, whispering secrets she couldn't quite decipher. The cabin loomed before her, rustic yet charming, framed by towering pines that seemed to protect her from the outside world. She took in the weathered timber and the small porch adorned with wild flowers. This, she thought, would be her sanctuary. After unpacking her belongings and settling in, twilight brushed the sky with hues of violet and orange. Claire lit a small fire in the rustic fireplace, its crackling soothing her nerves, as she decided to take a walk before darkness enveloped the forest. The darkening shadows danced around her, and as she wandered deeper into the trees, she felt an odd sense of being watched. Shaking off the sensation, she reminded herself she was here to focus on her writing. That night, as Claire prepared for bed, an unsettling sound halted her in her tracks. There it was again, a faint rustling, followed by what sounded like a branch snapping. She sat in the quiet of the cabin, straining to listen. Perhaps it was just an animal, she assured herself. But a shiver ran down her spine. She locked the door and climbed into bed, pulling the covers tightly around her. Morning light spilled through the windows, coaxing her from sleep. With a yawn, she padded to the front door, only to find it slightly ajar. Tightening her grip around the knob, Claire felt a sense of dread clawing at her chest. She swore she had locked it before retreating into her dreams. Heart racing, she kicked the door closed, reassuring herself it was just a draft. But in the back of her mind, questions began to take root. Had someone been there? Was she truly alone? With a sense of foreboding cloaking the cabin, Claire turned her attention back to her manuscript, hoping to silence her mounting fears. Little did she know, the forest held its own secrets, and someone was watching. Claire's days passed in a haze of dread and anticipation, the forest around her transforming into a living entity filled with whispers and secrets. As sunlight filtered through the branches, the cabin felt both like a sanctuary and a prison. She tried to bury herself in her writing, but the vibrant words of her manuscript escaped her as the shadows deepened. Each creak of the old wooden floorboards and the rustle of leaves drew her attention, pulling her further from her work and deeper into anxiety. Subtle signs began to plague her mind. A favorite mug was out of place on the kitchen counter. The carefully arranged stack of notebooks had been toppled, and the previously untouched jar of jam now had a spoonful missing. Each small change gnawed at her sanity, spurring thoughts that danced just out of reach. Was she truly losing her mind, or was there something darker at play? As dusk settled, the cabin felt increasingly claustrophobic, her isolation amplifying every sound, a branch tapping at the window, the wind howling through the pines, and the ever-present sensation that eyes were boring into her from the woods beyond. The nights were the worst. With each passing twilight, Claire found herself looking out the window with trepidation, scanning the darkness for any movement. She turned into a creature of habit, checking the locks obsessively and sleeping with a knife gripped tightly beneath her pillow, the cold steel offering a false sense of security in a place drenched in foreboding. But each time she closed her eyes, the deep woods answered with hushed whispers that echoed in her soul. One morning, the air was thick with a strange heaviness, a swirling tension that hung as visibly as the fog. Groggy from another restless night, Claire opened the front door, only to freeze at the sight before her. Muddy footprints, unmistakably human, trailed from the dense forest to her doorstep. Her heart thumped violently in her chest, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The footprints were unmistakable. She was not alone. She stepped outside, her breath hitching as she traced the prints with trembling fingers, leading into the shadowy embrace of the trees where no light dared linger. Each step deeper into the woods felt like a step into a dark abyss. The silence now a deafening roar in her ears. Had they been watching her all this time? Gripped by panic, Claire turned on her heel and dashed back to the cabin, the door slamming shut behind her, as if to contain a storm. Locked inside, she leaned against the door, her heart racing and mind spinning with a torrent of fear and disbelief. Instead of giving in to despair, she knew she had to fight. She spent the day drawing every curtain and locking every window, the previous night's rustles now amplified into memories of danger. Yet even as she fortified her haven, the dread within her refused to leave. The question lingered heavily. Who was out there, and what did they want? The forest, once serene, had morphed into a labyrinth of terror, the shadows alive with unspeakable possibilities. Little did Claire know that the true nightmare was only just beginning to unfold. The late afternoon light filtered through the cabin's windows, casting elongated shadows that twisted and danced across the worn floorboards. Claire's heart raced as she fortified her sanctuary. With every creak and groan of the old wood, her nerves tightened like a coiled spring. She set about barricading the doors, pushing heavy furniture against the entrance in a futile attempt to create a fortress against the unknown. The once familiar and inviting space now felt like a trap, a cage where the walls seemed to whisper secrets of impending doom. As night enveloped the cabin, the world outside descended into an unsettling stillness. Claire's resolve wavered under the weight of her fear, but she drew a deep breath, reminding herself that she had to confront the nightmare lurking just beyond the door. Armed with a kitchen knife, the cold steel an extension of her will, she peered through the curtains, scanning the encroaching darkness. The shadows pooled like ink beneath the towering trees, and for the first time, she could sense that she was not just hiding from her assailant, but actively waiting for their next move. Then it happened. A sound, soft but distinct, pierced the silence. The unmistakable scrape of something being dragged across the porch sent a jolt of adrenaline surging through Claire. She backed away from the window, her breath shallow and quickening. As she strained to listen, every muscle tensed in anticipation. Just as she steadied herself, a deafening crash echoed through the cabin as the door buckled under the impact of a body forcefully slamming against it. The wooden frame splintered. The intruder was here. Panic swept over her, but survival instincts kicked in. Claire dashed into the kitchen, her heart pounding against her rib cage. The knife felt like a flimsy shield against the storm of chaos that was about to engulf her. In a race against time, she flung open a drawer, hastily arming herself with whatever she could find. Another knife, a rolling pin, anything that could serve as a weapon. There was no more time for hesitation. The door gave way with a splintering gasp, and at that moment she knew that it was fight or flight. The intruder was a wild-eyed man, unkempt and ragged, with a manic gaze that flickered like a candle in the wind.
You shouldn't have come here.
He snarled, stepping over the threshold, his frame illuminated by the moonlight spilling through the door. Claire lunged forward, swinging the rolling pin with all her might, connecting with his side. He grunted in surprise, but quickly retaliated, knocking her onto the kitchen floor. The air was thick with fear and adrenaline, but Claire refused to be a victim. With a fierce determination, she scrambled to her feet and grabbed the knife, its blade glinting under the dim light. The struggle between them was primal and chaotic, a dance of desperation and survival. Claire fought like a cornered animal, slashing and jabbing with all the strength she had left. The adrenaline coursing through her veins dulled the pain of her injuries, each cut and bruise only fueling her resolve. As the battle waged on, furniture was upturned, the cabin a scene of destruction. The intruder was relentless, but so was Claire. Using her surroundings to her advantage, she maneuvered around him, utilizing the kitchen counter to create distance. In a last-ditch effort, she set a small pot of cooking oil ablaze, a move born of instinct and hope. The flames roared to life, casting flickering shadows that painted their struggle in stark relief. With one final push, she backed him towards the fire, forcing him to stumble over the edge of the counter. In that moment of imbalance, Claire seized her chance. She lunged forward, knife poised, and struck. A gasp escaped his lips, raw and desperate, as the fight drained from him for the moment. As dawn approached, the first light of day crept tentatively through the shattered windows of the cabin, illuminating the remnants of Claire's desperate struggle. Her body ached, and her reflection in the broken glass was that of a feral survivor, a fierce spirit overshadowed by the weariness of the night. The adrenaline that had propelled her moments ago now ebbed away, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that threatened to pull her under. She knew she had to escape. The woods outside were both a sanctuary and a maze, alive with the sounds of the early morning, yet holding the specter of danger within their depths. With a cautious glance toward the intruder, still breathing heavily on the floor, Claire seized her moment. She took a quick inventory of her surroundings, all too aware that any misstep could cost her dearly. Cracking open the door, she stepped onto the porch, the chill of the morning air biting against her skin. The world beyond was eerily quiet, the birds yet to awaken, the trees standing still like sentinels. Heart pounding in her chest, she took off into the thicket, her senses heightened. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig underfoot made her jump, her mind racing with thoughts of being pursued. Claire ran, stumbling through the dense underbrush, branches clawing at her skin, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had no clear direction, but felt an instinctual pull toward the main road, that thin line of asphalt she had traveled so many times before, now a symbol of hope and safety. Behind her, the silence was shattered by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, determined, and closing in. It was a chilling reminder that her fight was far from over. Just as the light began to brighten the horizon, Claire erupted from the tree line, gasping as she spotted the road ahead. Her heart surged with urgency, but the sense of safety was short-lived. She felt the ground tremble beneath her as the intruder burst from the forest, a menacing silhouette against the awakening sky. With desperation coursing through her veins, Claire sprinted toward the road, her legs pumping like pistons, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind her. In that critical moment, a car appeared, its headlights cutting through the dawn mist, a rare sight in these remote woods. Claire's heart leaped. Waving her arms frantically, she shouted for help, every ounce of her being focused on reaching this lifeline. The driver, a middle-aged man with a concerned expression, slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as he jumped from the vehicle. Claire dove into the passenger seat, breathless and frantic, as the man shouted for her to buckle up.
Go, go!
She cried, looking back to see the intruder's wild eyes locked onto her, a look of sheer rage igniting as Claire's escape unfolded. The car roared to life, and they sped away, leaving the chaos of the cabin and the woods behind. As they raced along the road, Claire dazedly retraced the night's horror in her mind. But safety was a fleeting illusion. Even in the warmth of the car, she felt a gnawing fear. Would he follow them? Would he seek her out again? The weight of her trauma settled over her like a blanket, oppressive and cold. They finally arrived at the nearest hospital, where paramedics rushed to her aid. The driver, his face etched with concern, reassured her as he relayed the harrowing details to the staff. Claire sank into a chair, her breath trembling as the chaos of the night unfolded in her mind like a film reel. In the sterile hospital room, she was tended to, her wounds cleaned and dressed, but the deeper scars of her ordeal remained untouched. As the police arrived to question her, she could see the concern mingling with disbelief in their eyes. The man was gone, vanished into the woods without a trace, leaving her alone with the haunting, unresolved sensation that her nightmares had only just begun. That night would forever mark her, a reminder of her strength and the darkness that lurked in the shadows. Even as she wrapped herself in the hospital blankets, the echoes of her terror lingered like ghosts, reminding her that she would need to confront her fears if she ever hoped to feel safe again.